Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's short briefing, just to give updates as a follow-up to last week. As we have seen over the past 2 weeks, there has been remarkable gains made thus far by the defense forces and the regional forces, these two forces being led at the forefront by Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. Yesterday, as we all note, the strategic towns of Dese and the industrial town of Kombolcha, among many other towns, have also been reclaimed by the national forces. In addition to many strategic locations that have been taken over by the National Defense Forces over the past 2 weeks, yesterday's feat is a strong blow to the terrorist groups that is currently in disarray. It has to be noted that a week ago, or about a week and a half ago, up to 12 of its senior ranking military personnel were taken out, which has contributed to this grave defeat on the battlefront. The national forces continue to apprehend TPLF fighters in great numbers, with many also heeding the call that had been extended earlier this week to surrender, and therefore heeding the call and surrendering to the defense forces. With a lot of these towns coming under the National Defense Forces, it is inevitable that there would be a lot of destruction. In the aftermath of TPLF's occupation of many towns in the Amhara and Afar regions, it has left behind an overwhelming amount of destruction of public and private property, as well as loss of many lives. I would like to take a few minutes now to show you some images that have been captured following the liberation of these towns by national forces. So these are just a few images that have come in from Mazazo. This is destruction of private hotels and properties. Food that had been stolen and dumped. This was humanitarian assistance food that they siphoned off, but dumped on their exit. In Kasagita in Afar, you see that a lot of public infrastructure has been demolished, turned down into ashes. Also in Debrecina, main point of attacks in this city was on hospitals and public health infrastructure, so a lot of medicines were looted. What they were not able to loot, they destroyed. In Shoarovit and Gashana, private banks were attacked, looted, as well as you can see, hotels have been looted, property destroyed, several banks again. Lalibela Airport, if you recall, they had done a similar act on Aksum Airport as well. So this is the destruction in Lalibela Airport that they have also left behind. Thank you. So these are just initial images that have come in. Obviously, over the next few days, we will see the extent of damages and destruction that have been left behind by TPLF, also as more documentation is on the way. In addition to the destruction of property directly affecting many lives, there is evidence emerging across many towns of grave atrocities and human rights abuses being inflicted by TPLF upon innocent civilians in those towns. In Gashana, in the North Shawa town of Ansokia, we have reports of mass killings that have been undertaken by the TPLF on innocent civilians. Similarly, there are also vast reports of rape that are emerging across these towns that were also occupied by TPLF. Again, while these are initial testimonies that we are sharing and that are surfacing, further investigations are needed to expose these grave human rights violations and also to hold the group accountable. At this point in time, for the federal side, there are investigators on the ground gathering as much evidence as they can. Yet it's also important over here to highlight that the failure of some Western countries and international organizations to look into these massive human rights violations and atrocities committed by the invading TPLF forces in the areas of the Amhara and Afar regional regions makes it clear that there might be some politically motivated and double standard position when it comes to the way that human rights issues are addressed in Ethiopia, particularly by these groups. To move on to humanitarian response update in the northern part of the country, basing it off on the updates that had been provided last week, as per the regional, as per reports that have been received from the National Disaster Risk Management Commission and the Emergency Coordination Committee, the spillover of the Tigray conflict in Amhara region is now estimated to have displaced more than 1.4 million people in the region. This is a notable increase from the figures that I had shared with you last week. Also, following the recent military victories against TPLF forces in Amhara region, the government has allocated over 28,000 metric tons of food for more than 2 million people in 24 waradas of North Wallo, North Shawa, and South Wallo. And also, since the government in these kind of instances is the first respondent during emergency situations, the first 13 trucks loaded with more than 5,000 quintals of different kind of food have been dispatched to Gashana and Lalibela. In Afar, the estimates that we have now is that more than 1.3 million people are in need of immediate emergency response, and more than or close to 400,000 people have been displaced from 17 waradas directly as a result of TPLF's aggression and belligerence in the region. So there are some partners that are engaged in the distribution of around 64,000 quintals of food to conflict-affected people. Around 7,500 emergency shelter and non-food items have been distributed in Gulina and Jifra waradas. Nevertheless, there is still a glaring gap in terms of humanitarian assistance, and particularly humanitarian assistance focus for these two regions, while the continued global outcry is only focused on the Tigray region. In Tigray, we had already shared that in the last briefing that the UNHS have resumed flights between Addis Ababa and Mekelle. Resultantly, to date, 4 return flights have been conducted from Addis to Mekelle and from Mekelle to Addis since the resumption of this service. The latest figure that I have is that a total of 203 trucks have arrived in Tigray with humanitarian supplies, and this has reached Mekelle. Again, some members of the international community that have been raising concerns about lack of humanitarian assistance in the Tigray region are also still quiet on the hold-up of 900 trucks by the TPLF that could be used to transport food and non-food items. And there is growing evidence to suggest that there is a refusal on the other side to return these trucks. Yet TPLF, as we have seen, is still using these trucks to move around its combatants from place to place, and also to transport the looted items from areas it has been routed out from. So yet again, here there is a double standard exhibited in this regard, as well, where the silence to TPLF's vast human rights abuses, the looting of property, the destruction, has been conducted in real time. The silence is quite questionable. Lastly, last week we had also made a call to Ethiopians living in the diaspora. Again, this is an extension of gratitude to Ethiopians in the diaspora that are actively engaged on multiple fronts. The reception by Ethiopians worldwide to the challenge that had been raised last week, which is the Great Ethiopian Homecoming, has been very, very positive. And this is a message to say that particularly your national carrier, Ethiopian Airlines, has announced 30% off on bookings made till December 20, and there's many other service providers that are engaged in ensuring that this Great Ethiopian Homecoming Challenge is done so at a large scale. Similarly, the Ministry of Tourism, which is leading a lot of activities under this challenge, has earlier today made announcements in relation to the call, and this would be made public or reach the public in due time. So once again, this is to extend the challenge to Ethiopians all around the world and to friends of Ethiopia to come back and show solidarity with vast sections of society and your compatriots that have been at the brunt of these challenges and atrocities committed by TPLF, but also to show the world that what is being lauded or what is being cascaded throughout international media spaces and airwaves is not as it is. So with this, I will open it up to questions that you have on the current issues. So let me start from this end and I'll come there.
Thank you, Bilani. Shifarra from ABC. My first question is, as you know, TPLF says it is making some strategical or tactical retreat rather than receiving a defeating blow from the combined forces of Ethiopia, which is spearheaded by Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. What's your response to that? And the other question is, a large number of diaspora communities have been, as you said, invited to come home. So what's the level of preparedness by the government and other concerned bodies to properly accommodate these expats? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Shifarra. On the first part of your question, I can't speak on behalf of the TPLF. Nevertheless, this allegation of strategic and tactical retreats being made, I hold them into the same space as about the 4-week rhetoric that had been spun, indicating that they were close to Addis. So I hold it in the same vein, and we don't really give it much more weight. I think the advances that have been made by the National Defense Forces, together with allied forces from the 2 different regions, is testament to the strategic preparedness of the National Defense Forces and the federal forces. So I think it speaks in of itself what has been achieved over the past 2 weeks. On preparedness, this is the call that is being made is to Ethiopians living in the diaspora, which means this is their home. Coming back home doesn't necessarily entail a big preparedness. Nevertheless, as I had indicated earlier, the Ministry of Tourism is the one that is spearheading various activities under this challenge. So the details of that will be emerging over the next day or so. But again, the call, regardless of any large-scale preparedness, the call is to come and show solidarity with the Ethiopians throughout the country, as well as those that are affected in this time.
Thank you for the opportunity. I am Wagayo Mulina from Addis Media Network. I'm going to have a couple of questions. The first is to what extent the government forces are marching. The plan is just kicking them out of the Amhara and Afar regions, or the government has again a plan to seize Mekelle city again? This is the first question. Next. Since following the calls of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, 100,000s of the rebel groups are surrendering. So what will be done for these captives? What is the plan? Are the government giving them a training and then heading them to their region, or is there another things that's planned on behalf of the government?
Okay, thank you, Agayo. The questions that you're asking, this is the purview of the National Defense Forces, so I will defer to them to reply on these kind of issues. Brooke.
Thank you very much. I'm Brooke. My first question is, a group of countries have recently announced that the government of Ethiopia is rounding up Tigrayans in the capital and across the country. So what do you say about that, and can you give us a picture into how many people have been arrested as a result of the state of emergency and how they are being handled? The second point is that the Amhara region has told us, or it has given us some picture or figures into the damage in the region caused because of the conflict that expanded from the Tigray region to the Amhara and Afar region. So do you have a national figure that tells us how much damage has been caused because of the conflict, and how many years, as the Amhara region says that it might take 30 years to recover from the damages, and do you have a national figure that can tell us what that looks like? And finally, there has been an effort by the President Obasanjo to negotiate between the TPLF and the Ethiopian government, and can you give us the status of that effort by President Obasanjo? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Brooke. On your first question, with reference to the call that has been made, we had already indicated on several occasions that the state of emergency is not targeted at any particular group of people based on their ethnic identity or any form of protected category to which they belong to. So insinuating that it is in that regard is misguided. It's not only misguided, but it is also perpetuating a destructive narrative. It is also perpetuating a narrative that is trying to push, along cleavages of what could be deemed as differences by communities outside of Ethiopia, but that is not the case. There are many people under the state of emergency who have been apprehended by the security sector based on credible evidence and testimony and tips that have been given. The security apparatus has been doing the due investigation and releasing these people as well. So I don't have a figure for you because this is a turnaround process. There's people that are apprehended, there are people that go through the investigation process, and there are people who are released as well. So again, this outcry for what you stated is part of the double standard because this is a legitimate government. This is a government that is going through the the constitutional process of enacting any kind of measures for security to ensure that state order is well protected. So anything that is in direct interference to this is seen as a push towards the sovereignty of the country, because these are clear state processes and mandates and processes that the nation is going through. So it doesn't hold water to say that individuals are being held on that. I think it's really important to also give the same kind of outcry for what I was mentioning earlier with regards to the vast human rights violations and atrocities that is being waged by a terrorist group on its own people or its own compatriots within the country. So I think that double standard needs to be checked. On the second reference that you were making with the specific figures, as you know, just yesterday about 3 towns were liberated, so this is an ongoing process. I think it's very hard to pinpoint a final national vigor because these kind of processes are very precise and they do take specific measures need to be taken to document this well, and I cannot just share that with you at the top of my head. On the negotiation subject that you've talked about, as I have already relayed before, His Excellency is expected to share this and whatever his findings have been and whatever his proposal is. So in due time, when it is time, we'll alert you on that.
Thank you. Well, my question is, could you please just give us some details on the destruction in terms of human life and property in those 2 towns, Desi and Kombolcha.
Okay, thank you, Malaskacho. Today, I don't have this because the news of their liberation is something that came out yesterday. We do have people, again, as I was saying, federal entities or the concerned federal entities are being dispatched to ensure that this kind of data gathering is in there. So I still don't have any information to the level of destruction. But again, looking at the pattern of destruction that the TPLF has left in other towns, I would not doubt that there is much that they have also left behind. And again, this will be emerging within the next few days, so I will share with you the data as it reaches me. Thank you.